Welcome to Up All Night DIY. I'm Monica. Thanks for joining me. We have something a little different for you today. This is the first installment of the Evermore Bridal Fair 2024. This will entail a series of collaborations that will help you design elegant yet budget-friendly wedding decor. So let's head on over to Dawn at Shabby Meets Bling and find out what we're doing.
Hello, Monica. As you know, my bride has chosen you as her sign maker for all of her wedding events. The first event is her engagement party. For this event, she would like you to create 3 signs.
Sign number 1 will be for the bar area. Sign number 2 will be for the food area, the dining space. And finally, sign number 3 will be for the dessert area, for the cake tasting space. The basic design of this wedding is translated to you in these images. This will steer you in the direction the bride desires while letting you unleash your own creativity.
We can't wait to see the fabulous creations you come up with.
Today I'm going to show you how I would do a mock-up for a sign, and in this case it's going to be for an engagement party. I'm going to show you how I do this in 10 easy steps. Let's get into it. The first one we're going to create is going to be for the cake sampling. So, I opened the project in Photoshop. I just created a new document. It's going to be 12 by 12. And what I'm going to do is go over, and I've chosen this white distressed wood plank as my background surface. So I'm going to move that into my layout document, just drag it and drop in. I'll position it where I want it, and that's where we're going to start. So that's step 1. Step 2, we're going to add some additional distressing to the board. So I'm going to go over here to my brush tool and choose the brush I want from the drop-down menu, and I pick the Splatter brush. There you go. You can kind of see it's just a bunch of little circles. See what I mean? Now the color defaults to black, but I want to change that. I'm going to change the opacity of the color to 22%. So you can do that here on your layer tab. Over on the side here, it's actually your properties tab. But I'm going to click that drop down menu and I'm going to change that to 22%. And then I'm just going to click randomly. And when I do that, it's more of a gray instead of that deep black. And I'm just clicking wherever I feel like it might need some. I can always add more later if I think it needs it, but I think that's good for now. So that's step 2. Step 3, we're going to add some corner elements to our design. All of the designs that we will be using are from Traci Vanover's Etsy shop. You'll find a link below for that. And all of these elements have a French flair, so I'll put the link to this particular set in the description box for you too. So you can see I've got this floral scroll here. It's black, but we want to change the color to blue because that's what the bride wants. So in order to change the color, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a real quick and easy way to do this. It's called color overlay. So all we're going to do is go up to the layer menu, choose duplicate layer, and I'm going to change the name to blue. I'll just type that right in here. If you look over here on the layer panel, you'll see that I have 2 layers. One says blue, and the other one says layer 1. I want to make sure that the one that says blue is highlighted. And I'm going to double click that to open up my layers window panel. I'll come down here on the left side and pick color overlay. And it'll take us to the screen here that says color overlay. I want my blend mode to be normal. The opacity is 100%. And this little rectangle that's black here, I'm going to change that. That's how we set our color. So I'll click on it and I'll pick the blue that we're going to be using. You can choose from whatever color you want using the little circle, but I actually know the number, so I'm going to type it in down here where it says number. This is the blue right here that we're going to be using, kind of periwinkle. I'll click OK. See, it changed the color of the design. Really easy, right? Next, we're going to move this into our design layout. So I'm going to click and drag it into our layout. And now we can resize it. I want to use this in the corner, in all the corners. So what we're going to do is we'll resize it by holding down the Shift key, and I'll bring my cursor up to the corner, and I'm just going to pull down until I get it to the size that I think is good. And I'm going to rotate it a wee bit. I want to make it a wee bit wider, so I'm just going to pull on the sides until I get it nice and broad. Now I let go of the Shift key so that I can manipulate it, the width of it, etc. I like the way that looks. We're going to go with that. I'm going to click the check mark, and that just highlights my little scroll. You can see the outline around it, that little blue box. Another thing I want to do is to add a drop shadow to this, because when I'm going to paint the sign, I would definitely add a drop shadow. So to do that, I'm coming over here to my FX button, choose drop shadow. That brings up the layer menu again. I'm going to click drop shadow, and I'm going to change the color. I want that to be a little more gray. So that's good, like a hippo gray. Now, if I wanted to, I could change the distance in the spread and all that by coming over here and moving these sliders. But I like the way it was. I'm going with the default. Now you can see that the box around my image is still highlighted. So what I'm going to do is go up to the layer menu and choose duplicate layer. I'm going to name that layer right top corner and click OK. And I'm going to drag that, whoops. I'm going to pull my copy away, and you see those pink lines? That's showing me that I'm lined up with the original. So I'll bring it over to the side here, and as far as I can. And I want to flip this image. If you come over here to your properties panel, you'll see these little arrows, and if you click that, it'll flip the image. I'm just going to position that where I want it to go. That looks good, matches up with the other. Now I'm going to copy both of these. So I'm going to click both layers, and if you hold down the Shift, it'll highlight them both. I'll go up to duplicate layer. Now it won't let you name this layer when you've highlighted more than one layer. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Just hit OK. Now it's made a copy of those two layers, and I'm going to drag them down to the bottom, and I'm going to flip them again. But this time, we're going to flip them vertically. So we'll come back over to the properties panel, and we'll go over to the arrows that show the vertical flip. There you go. See, super easy, right? So that's step 3. Step 4, we're going to fade and distress the corner elements. I want them to look much more vintage and distressed. To do that, we're going to add a new layer. We'll call it Corner Fade. Now I'm going to come over to my paintbrush tool. I'm going to choose a speckle brush, and I'm going to let's use Chunky Charcoal, and I'm going to use a medium gray. So I'll select that from my color chart, and I'm going to change the opacity to 22 again. We can always darken it if we need to. You find the opacity over here in the Layers tab. So you can just type in 22 or whatever. And I'm just going to lightly stroke over the edges and the elements. It's very light, but you know what? We kind of want that. It's easier to add layers of the fade if needed. We're just going to come along here and there and add just by clicking. Just kind of knock some of the color down, make it look more faded. I find doing it this way looks more authentic than if we were to just reduce the color or the opacity on the actual scroll elements. This looks more like it's hand painted. Know what I'm saying? Step 5, we're going to add yet another layer to add even more fade and distress around the corners and the edges, not really so much over the scrolls. So once again, we'll go up to the layers and add a new layer, and I'm just going to title this Fade. I'm on a kind of charcoal gray color. My opacity is at 100. That's a little too dark, so I'm going to knock it down a bit. Let's try it at 25. Yeah, I think that'll be good. So I'm just going to click here and there along the edge. And I'm doing more of an individual click than a stroke. Just going to go along here, you know, give it some variety. I don't want it to be uniform. So I'm just going to come out in some areas and add some more where I think it needs it. It's just by clicking. I gotta tell you, this is so much fun. Yeah, so that's it for step 5. Step 6, we're going to add a little more splatter in a darker color. And I'm just going to use the same brush that I was just using for the fade. So I'm going to come up here and add a new layer and call this layer Splatter 2 because we already have a Splatter 1. Let's see what this looks like. Yeah, that's pretty dark. But what I think I'll do is I'll do a couple in this darker color and then I'll come back and kind of tone them down with a lighter color. Now, let's change the opacity a wee bit. We'll go down to about 77%. I think that looks good. So, I think I still want to go over this with an even lighter gray. So I'm going to go up to the layer panel, add a new layer, and we'll call this Splatter 3. And I'm going to choose a lighter gray from up here. Let's see what that looks like. It's not really that much lighter. So let's change the opacity on that to about 80. And I'm going to kind of cover up some of the dark spots and just fill them in. And let's go even lighter. Let's pick a lighter color. Yeah, I'm liking that. I'm turning it down a wee bit. I don't want it to be too blobby. Let's go even lighter and maybe come in. We're going to go down to like 20% and just kind of tone down all the colors. But you get the idea. Just play around with it until you're happy with what it looks like. Just as if you were painting with a paintbrush. That's it for step 6. Step 7, we're going to do even more distressing, but this time just along the border. Right on the very edge, I'm going to darken that up a little bit. I pick my color, and I'm going to bring the opacity up to about 45. I forgot to add the layers, so let's do that. Go up to the layer, choose new layer, and we're going to call it Border Distress. Click on that layer, and I'll pick my paintbrush. I'm going to use the same brush that I used before. Don't worry about that up there, we'll get rid of that later. I'm going to change my opacity to 45. Let's take a look at that. That's too late. So, pick a darker color. Yeah, that's better. Don't worry about all that overhang up top. We'll get rid of that after. Okay. So again, I'm just going to randomly click here and there until I'm happy with it. And as I said, we'll clean up all those edges, no worries. Anything that's overhanging, I'll come back and erase later. I think that looks good, so we're going to go with that, and that's step 7. I'm happy with the look of my background, so now I'm going to save it as a template. That's step 8. I'll choose Save As from the drop-down menu. I want to save this as a Photoshop file, which is the default extension. I'll name the sign Template. You can see that the type of file is Photoshop, And as I said, I'm going to leave that as is. I'll click Save and OK. And now it has saved it as a Photoshop file. All the layers are still there, but I also want to save it as a PNG file. So I'm going to go back up to Choose, Save a Copy, and I'm going to change the file extension to the PNG. The file name stays the same, only the extension changes. The PNG version now has merged all the layers. And that's going to make our next step much easier. So this was step 8, on to step 9. For step 9, we're working with the PNG version of our file. And we're going to add text. So we're going to add a new layer. And we're going to title this one Text 1. Click OK. Now I'm going to choose my text tool and type in my text. I've already chosen my font and the color, so I'm just going to position it where, I think it should go, and we'll fuss with it later. Now I'm going to add a new layer for the next layer of text, and that'll be called Text 2. Okay, I'll type in my second line of text. I'm going to link the layers by clicking on my text. So I want the top layer and the bottom layer of text to be encased in that little blue box. That will allow me to link the layers. Now I'm going to right click and it brings up this little menu and I'm going to choose Link Layers. This is going to allow me to move the text as a unit now. I'm just going to adjust the size and move it around a wee bit, and then when I'm happy with it, I'll click my check mark. Now, one of the E's and the A's, they will both get an accent mark. This font doesn't have accent marks, so I'm going to create my own by going to a font that I know will work. First, we'll add a layer for the accent, and we'll call this Accent 1. I'll click on my text tool, and I'm going to change the text to the agency font, and now I'm going to size it to a more manageable size, and I'm going to use the apostrophe for the accent mark. I'm going to have to flip it around. I'm just going to size that a wee bit. And then I'm going to click OK. And now I'm going to turn the font. Sometimes this happens, it stretches out, whatever. But we'll get it turned around and then we'll adjust it so. I now can move it over the E. And we'll come back and fuss with that in a minute. I'll add another layer for the circumflex accent. And we're going to call that Accent 2. To create the circumflex, I'm going to use a greater than sign, and I'm going to flip it so that it looks like a little pointy hat. I'll move that over the first A in Ghetto, and I'm going to use my arrow keys to adjust it just where I want it to go. Sometimes it's just easier to use the arrow keys. Now we'll adjust the accent over the E. And that looks better. I think we'll go with that. There we go. Once again, I'm going to select all of these layers, including the text layers and the accent layers, and link them so that we can move them as one unit. So it can adjust the size of the text, stretch it out and whatnot. We'll add the drop shadow by coming over to the Effects button, clicking that, and choosing Drop Shadow. I need to type in the color that I want to use for my drop shadow, which will be the same blue that we used earlier. That's good, so I'm going to click OK. Here we'll move in a wee bit so you can see the drop shadow around the lettering. I'll click OK. Now I click on the accent mark and add a drop shadow to that. I'm going to need to unlink the layers here in order for the drop shadow to affect all of the text. So I'm going to do that now. And now we have to do the circumflex as well. There we go. And that's it. That's how you add the drop shadow. Once again, I'm going to highlight all of the texts and link the layers so I can move them again as an individual unit. I'll make some more adjustments until I'm happy, and that's it for step 9. For step 10, we're going to distress our text. So I've chosen my brush tool and my color, and I'm just going to come over top of my text and click here and there to add speckles to it. Anywhere where I think, it should look more distressed, I'll add a few sprinkles, and that's that. To clean up any markings that have gone past my sign, I'll just click on my eraser tool and erase them. No biggie. Now I'm going to save it, and I'll choose Save As. I'm going to rename it. Once again, I'll save it as a Photoshop file and as a PNG. This way, if any changes need to be made to it, I can easily do that by opening my original Photoshop file, because the Photoshop file will maintain all of the layers. Once that's done, I'll send my PNG files over to Dawn for the client's review. Now, since I saved this as a template, I can come back in here and do my dining room sign. So all I have to do is type in my text, just like I did before, adding it in layers, distressing it, etc., and save that as a PNG and a Photoshop file as well, in case any adjustments need to be made. And there you go. Makes it so much easier, right? Especially if you're doing multiple signs with the same theme. My third sign is a round sign for the bar area, so this is a little different. I'm going to add a wreath to this. I'll do the color overlay to change the wreath's color to the blue that we're using. I drag and drop it onto my background surface, size it. I add my text. Now the text is a little more involved because we're going to add an arch, but that's for another day. I'm just going to show you real quick here. Making a mock-up of your design is a really good way to show your client what they're getting without having to make a physical piece. Gives them a really good idea, and they can give you any tips or advise you what they like and what they don't like without you having to, physically paint something. All corrections and adjustments can be made right on the computer, and then you have a design to follow when you're actually making your physical piece. You can also take this to a printer and have them printed out to size, and you could decoupage these right onto some wood, and there you go. You don't even have to paint them. But most importantly, we wanted to let you know that you can really be hands-on with whatever, whether it's a wedding or a party, and make your own decorations relatively inexpensively, budget-friendly. This is a great way to go. You can head on over to Traci's Etsy shop. She has tons of printables to choose from, so whatever your aesthetic is, you're going to find something there. This will be an ongoing series, so there will be more upcoming videos on other ways to create your own aesthetic and decorations for your wedding or your party, whatever your celebration happens to be. So be sure to check back for that. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I know it's a little different than what I normally do. I do have people ask me how I design some of my stuff. This is a good example of how I do it. I hope you found it helpful. Here's a final look at all 3 signs. Please be sure to stay tuned for Dawn's video. She's up next. If you have any questions for me, drop them in the comment box. I'll have another video tomorrow, more in line with what you're used to. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. Stay creative, my friends. Thanks for hanging with me. See you next time. Up all night with Monica.